Hey everybody, this is going to be a rant video about all of the problems wrong with Nino Kuni and Netmarble as a company. I'm sure we'll get to gacha stuff as well, because this is a gacha game, and of course that does influence a large amount of their decisions, but the game is just terribly designed in the first place. It's a shame that it's so fun and that I'm still playing it, or that it's been enjoyed by so many people, because there was really something special here, and they've just thrown it onto a scrap heap and covered it in gasoline, then started lighting matches. And that's basically kind of what I want to go into. So the first thing I want to rant about, the worst part of the game, in my opinion, is a tough call. I'm going to say the worst part of the game is combat power. The worst part of this game is this number right here. This number right here is supposed to be a representation of how strong your character is. With the very first thing, the most, and this is going to be a pattern of all of the decisions that Netmarble as a company has made with this game. All of the things that they display are basically misdirections. This number really, while it's a vague representation of how strong you are, it is so broadly manipulatable, or underrepresented, or overrepresented in ludicrous ways, that it is really no measure of how strong a player is. And because of the enhancement system that they've went with our game, which is this purple number in the bottom corner if you've never played the game before, it's really, really way out of whack in our version, because the scalability of things is insane. If you're not aware, the Korean version, the max enhancement was level 40, and that was basically unattainable until enhancement protection items were made available in the game. So it's basically a lot of this problem, it's not that it didn't exist or doesn't exist in the Korean version, it's that it is multiplied by many times in our version, where the max enhancement level is 99. But really, CP in general is a terrible misdirect to the players. A lot of the stats here don't actually add combat power to your character. For example, the stat adds a total of 0 CP, or this stat adds a total of 0 CP, or this stat adds a total of 0 CP. These things don't add combat power at all. This stat adds 0 CP. However, this stat adds a ton of CP, but doesn't actually do anything for me. It actually, like that functionally, it actually does nothing in every interaction I have with another player. It's impossible for it to, because in my PvP deck, I run so much of this stat here that this stat actually is obsolete and doesn't do anything. If I was fighting somebody with the exact same build as myself, both of these stats are obsolete, because this stat is way too hard to get relative to this stat, which is very easy to get. So you actually can't get enough of this if you're fighting somebody smart to even have a crit happen in the first place. Now, luckily for me and lots of other players, most of the players are not smart. So this does have some small value, just not very much. Just like this has value, just not against anybody good at the game, which is unfortunate, because generally, if you're at a certain tier of competition, you're competing with peers, generally, and your peers are going to have put thought and stuff into their builds, and perhaps they are making good decisions with their resources as well, and they understand the stats, and they have not been misled like the overwhelming majority of the player base. But a lot of the haves and have-nots in the PvP in this game, it's because they actually understand what these stats do, and they haven't been misled by them. But like, these flat values add such a large amount of CP, and basically none of them do anything for almost all interactions, which is insane. It's just an insane way to calculate things in the game, or for these stats to be everywhere. With predatory things like, for example, the mounts in this game are almost exclusively shop items that you can buy, and they almost exclusively, uh, well, they all give you 3 stats. One gives you 4 stats, but most of them all give you 3 stats. This one, very luckily, has 2 primary stats, attack and HP, and 1 dumper stat, crit resist. But a lot of mounts have just HP and then 2 dumper stats, which really inflate your CP. As you can see, these 2 mounts have the same base starting combat power, and it can get up there. If you deck your stuff out, like this is in the 50s, and it's not wearing these 2 items in the center, because I've taken them off because they don't help me in any way. They don't actually add any value to my character. They just increase my combat power. Which, if I didn't mention it yet, that is what determines your placement in PvP. You have to match with people of your equivalent-ish. There's some broad reaches here for sure, based off the availability of players. But the matchmaking system is trying to balance 3 players or 5 players, if you add the whole team's combat power together, with another team within a specific range of that team's combat power. So things get out of control. Obviously, there's some crazy whales in this game. They've got like 10 million combat power. They are stronger than 5 mil players, let alone 2 5 mil players. So we definitely have some balance issues with that right off the hop. But the other thing is, a lot of the CP that a lot of players have is misunderstood and not actually affecting interactions with their characters. So I'll explain these stats very quickly. These stats are validation and alteration stats. Okay, so a normal interaction is I swing my weapon, it hits the target, it does the damage. All right. A crit rate percent and an evasion rate percent stat, what they do is they try to alter that interaction. The evasion tries to alter the hit from not occurring, even though the person was clearly struck with my spear, for example. Their evasion rate percent allowed them to proc a dodge or something, and I miss. Or with a crit, I alter the interaction by adding a massive crit damage multiplier to the interaction at the rate of my crit rate percent. Okay. The resist rate percent, the crit resist rate percent, and the accuracy rate percent try to nullify alterations to the standard interaction. So accuracy rate tries to prevent somebody from proccing an evasion, and crit resist rate tries to prevent somebody from proccing a crit. And the rate percent, if it is higher than the other rate percent, nullifies it. So 1-to-1, basically. I shouldn't say if it's higher. If it's higher, it nullifies it entirely. But if it's not higher, it subtracts 1-to-1. So if I had, let's say, 20.5% crit rate, and as you can see, I have 20% crit resist rate, it would subtract that 20%. So my crit rate would only be 0.5% chance, or basically nothing. Very, very low. Making crit resist rate very, very, very strong. The flat value crit does not increase my crit rate percent. What it does is, if my crit is higher than the enemy's crit resist, it validates and applies my rate percent in full. It needs to be above the enemy's crit resist value to apply your rate percent in full. If it is not, then it's penalized. So, for example, in this case, we'll use the evasion and accuracy. My accuracy is much higher than my evasion. If I'm attacking a clone of my own self, I would be penalized on evasion percent. So my evasion percent would actually be negative. It would be below 0, because my evasion rate is 0%. But even if it was 26% or something like that, I would still not be able to evade, because the accuracy rate is 27%. So even if my evasion flat was higher than my accuracy and I wasn't being penalized, even in that case, I still wouldn't have enough evasion percent to even dodge somebody with this level of accuracy rate percent. And the thing is, it's very easy to get this stat. So there's lots of people who have invested in evasion items or other things that give evasion, but really they're just increasing their stats and adding CP in a way that doesn't actually have a meaningful interaction, because especially with the accuracy rate percent, all weapons at Awaken level 3 get this subline for accuracy rate. These are super rare, so they have 7%. Regular weapons, I don't have any right now, but a regular weapon would add 5%. Oh, here's one. So this one adds 5%. And the evasion boots, there's two pairs of them, one for basic attacks and one for skills, which it's obscene that they even needed to make an extra pair of boots that had that separation, because there's just not enough evasion percent to evade anything in the first place. So you can't evade. Because you can't evade, well, the reason you can't evade is because there's too much accuracy rate going around. And there's lots of excess sources to get accuracy rate. There's a pair of 3-star gloves, which is like basically the common mobs drop this stuff, and it has 5% accuracy rate on it. There's a buff that you can get that lasts an entire hour. PvP is only open for 2 hours. So for a very, probably the cheapest investment you would make every time you do a PvP, for the 2 hours it's open, you could spend 30 gilder, unless there's a discount. Sometimes there's a discount, which is like the guild currency. And that currency is, everybody has tons of it. Like, there's no shortage of this. People get over 1,000 something a week, like twice a week. Spending 30 is basically nothing. It's not even a consideration. It's just something you can do that costs you basically nothing. So there's just so much availability of accuracy rate that people counter any type of potential evasion build by accident. So all evasion items are already useless. They don't do anything. There's no way to make them good unless they add some obscene source of rate percent value, because the flat value can't add stats. It can only take away stats or validate. So all of that CP from the accuracy, the crit resist, and the evasion flat value stats, they basically, in most situations, when you're attacking players who have built properly and understand these stats, they don't do anything in these interactions. Basically never do anything, which is crazy. It's crazy because they add a huge amount of CP. Another thing is a lot of these sublines on the equipment add like this great buff. But there's items, two of the most popular items in the game are a chest piece that gives you a buff to your HP, which is one of the primary stats, and one that buffs defense, which is another primary stat. And it's not uncommon for somebody to have 5, 6, 700,000 combat power just from those buffs alone. But they're really bad buffs. Like they're like, it's worse than this. Way worse, like infinitely worse. Like turning off an entire massive damage, like the largest damage modifier, is extremely powerful. Giving yourself a 20% buff to your defense stat is basically non-existent. Damage from a player, so the other super rare is 10% to 20% HP, and this is 15% to 30%. HP is a representation of the amount of damage you could take, and this just lowers the amount of damage that you take from players. So let's say, just for simplicity, that they're 1-to-1 stats, and they basically would do the exact same thing. The thing is, this adds 0 combat power. It doesn't add combat power at all. Just like this, it adds 0 combat power. Whereas large buffs to primary stats add, like I said, it wouldn't be crazy for it to add 60,000, 600,000, 700,000 combat power. Now, if you're attacking somebody in PvP and you've been matched with let's say somebody like, so I'm 7 mil on the rankings, and I match with another 7 mil person. Okay, but let's say that they're using the primary stat buffing items instead. First off, their survivability is way lower than mine. Way lower than mine. It's not comparable. So my attack is much more valuable relative to their HP as my target than theirs is to mine. But if I was the same combat power of them and they were like 700,000 CP inflated or something like that, that's roughly equivalent to 70,000 attack. So I would have somebody at equal level who was not using these things, I would have 70,000 attack more than them, potentially. I know it's not coming from the HP and defense stats, because they are presumably there with those buffs. So while my native attack and HP and defense would be higher than theirs before the buff, it would be much lower after the buff, but not to a point that's increasing their survivability because they're foregoing these superior stat lines that don't add combat power at all, which is, in my opinion, not an oversight. I think this was something that was done deliberately by the developers to tilt things and really mislead players into building their characters because they're chasing this CP number and they want this number to be high so they get perceived as strong in the game. But really, like I said in the example I just gave, they're often 60, 70,000 attack weaker with lower survivability. So my attack is through the roof compared to theirs. My defense is through the roof compared to theirs. Or I should say, we'll say the damage reduction, because defense is a damage reduction stat. HP is a representation of how much damage you can take. Defense is a representation of how much damage is being reduced. And attack is a representation of what is going to be multiplied by your skill multipliers in your calculation to do damage. And this kind of gets into the enhancement as well, because the three primary stats, HP, attack, and defense, basically are the bulk of your combat power that your character has. But the game was originally designed to only go up to level 40 enhancement. It was never play tested to go up to where we are right now. We have items that can go up to level 99 in the North American or global version of this game. The original Korean version capped at 40, and getting to 40 was a pipe dream. It was basically impossible. Their cursing system, where this purple glow you see on my equipment, if you've not played the game before, was not attainable to get to 40. It was basically impossible. There was no way to protect your enhancements if you failed and went down, and if you failed at the 20% rate or whatever obscenely low rate it was, maybe 15%, I know it was savagely low. If you failed, you could lose up to 10 levels and go and then your item basically is destroyed. It'd be easier to make a new one from scratch than to go for to get it back to like 30 or 31 or whatever it was previously. It's nearly impossible once it's cursed to fix that item. But they have this deliberate ambiguity to the way that they portray the stats and the relative amount of combat power it gives. And then they have all these very powerful abilities that are clearly huge increases in combat power. For example, this damage percent subline, damage to player, or if it's just damage percent increase from some other source. There's passives that the familiars give you, which if that's these things down here. So for example, this familiar gives me 2% damage for each attack familiar. If I get up to the awaken level 7, it gives me 3%. Like this one's awaken 7. These familiars all have the same passive. So that would be 27% damage increase. But that damage percent subline adds no combat power. I only get combat power from the actual flat stats that this familiar gives me, which is crazy, because the familiar gives me, a few thousand stats. It's really kind of minuscule, but it gives me a skill with a massive multiplier, which is calculated not off the familiar stats, but off of my player stats. And then this passive, this passive increases a modifier that doesn't add combat power. So I get, I have 71k combat power from this familiar, but it basically adds like 1 million or more worth of combat power to me. So you have these really disproportionate swings and things are just placed all over the place with all these ridiculous perceptions that are built in from the developers to trick the players into thinking their combat power is this way or another way. And what they've done is they've made the awaken levels give next to no combat power. When I awaken this, I only get a small amount of CP gain from the flat value stats that I gained. These sublines that level up or that are unlocked, like you basically start here and then you unlock these other ones at 3 and 7. And then at level 10, the main subline goes up to twice what it started at level 0. But you get no, like, this is basically the item. This is what I want from the item. And all of the combat power comes from the primary stats, and none of it, literally 0, comes from these large modifiers. Literally 0. Which is insane. It's just insane. if you were the type of person to just want to buy all these things, then your combat power doesn't increase for just getting this all the way to level 10. You'd have all your stuff really, really high, and then when you fight somebody in PvP, they think to themselves, oh, this person is the same CP as me. But then, like, little do you know, all of their stuff is like awakened to the max, and all of their abilities are next level, and all of your stuff is weak compared to theirs, and their multipliers are 2 to 3 times what your multipliers are, and their stats they're using a build like mine for crit resistant damage reduction. You're using defense increase and HP increase. Like, your CP is inflated through the roof. You've got the decorations for your mounts on every single slot, even though these slots don't give primary stats. They only give the trash stats, and you have every single one of the mounts because you're just buying all of them like a fool, and because you want to get everything in the game. Maybe you have like a collection thing or whatever gacha problem you have for these games, and you have no self-control, and you're just getting everything from the shop, which you can't blame you. This is another one of the insane things about this game. Everything, literally everything, is a product in this game. There is nothing in this game that is not here for you to buy. Look at the tabs here. These are like limited time tabs, like where you can just get a bunch of stuff. Look, weekly per account. Why don't you get this every week? 3 times. Get this 2 times. Get this 3 times. Just get it every single week. Get this. Could you imagine if World of Warcraft, like, this is a World of Warcraft subscription, just one of them, and then it's like, here, get all these every week. This is in one section of one tab during an event period. This is a special. Everything in this game, everything is some type of product. There's nothing in the game that exists to enhance the game experience. Everything exists to become some type of scarce resource to be turned into a product. Everything without exceptions. There's even things that are kind of necessary that a lot of people. So I don't have like these things. I haven't had them for quite some time now. This actually gives you a movement speed buff, and this gives you an attack speed buff, and the values are high. 8% is a lot, especially for movement speed. That's a very large number for your movement speed. Like the most amount of movement speed you can get buffed with a piece of equipment is 20% from the highest level movement speed shoes being awakened to max level. It starts at 10 and it goes up to 20 at max level, which the amount of pieces, you need 16. You need 16 pieces if you want to guarantee it all the way up. You can gamble some levels, but if you lose, you lose. Gambling is gambling, and while the averages should work out, the only surefire way is to have 16 copies. But this gives attack speed. It also gives the gems and the other stuff. But basically, this is the thing that people are kind of buying it for. And if you don't buy it, then look at these prices. This is in Canadian prices. So there's also this ridiculous price. If you're an American player, your price is obviously lower. Mine's about 30% higher. But there's also a tax on this because I'm Canadian as well. So I have to pay a 13% sales tax if I want this as well. So just with these two things, that's $40 just for this. And this would kind of be like the monthly subscription things that people would go to. But then there's another one for these. And then there's another one for these. And this is every 2 weeks, I believe. We have 14 days. Yeah, these are 14-day ones. So, there's another $55 and 13% tax for little old me if I want these, if I want to unlock that. These are the battle pass items. And the hilarious thing is the stuff that you get is basically garbage. There's really the amounts of the things that you get are they're really low. They're really low. It's not that these are useless resources in this banner. This banner is basically completely useless. This one, arguably, you can use all these resources. It's just it's not justified by the price tag. It's ridiculous. This is one of these super rare things. You can choose one of them. This familiar has been added to our standard banner. I believe that this was event only for Halloween in Korea. So what's crazy is there's rich people in Korea that would complain that we could still get it and they can't until Halloween again or whatever, which isn't the problem. The problem is that they created this thing they basically removed it from circulation, and then they charge $110, $125 after the tax, or $80 US for these things. And the whole thing, like when you get to this, like there's so many things, every single thing. This the only thing that I am getting anymore is these. So this is the enhancement things for the weapons, and honestly, getting these makes me sick when I get them. The amount you get, it's too small. I'm really hoping Blue Protocol comes out soon, because like this really is just kind of the only thing I'm into right now, other than just standard whatever stuff to pass time. But this is the only game that I'm like super into right now, and it's unfortunate that it's run by this ridiculous company where absolutely everything is next level scarcity, and then the price for things is, if this was some other gacha provider, if you just scaled to like the amount that you get in these things for the price, I wouldn't be surprised if another company would come to the conclusion that these prices should be an order of magnitude lower, or the reward should be an order of magnitude higher. But everything is like this in this game. Everything, absolutely everything, and it's completely insane. And that's not even the main complaint. My main complaint is that almost all of these things that you can buy, most of the things disproportionately add combat power in a way that makes you feel stronger, but does not make your character stronger. And this tricks people into thinking that they probably just need to spend more, or that there's something that they're doing wrong, or trying to put them in some negative place, when really they've just been misled by the developers in a number of different ways. And then after they've with the enhancement system, for example, they come up with these enhancement dolls that make your levels, you don't lose your levels when you fail enhancements. Like, they create this absolutely savage system, and then months later, after who knows how many people quit because of that type of savage system, they start selling, instead of fixing the problem, they sell something without changing the game. This is a classic gacha tactic. They deliberately design it to be terrible on purpose. And I think that all these other things, like manipulating the stats to no effect, for example, like with the crit flat values and accuracy flat, like those types of things, it kind of, like, those things are a way that you can build those stats really easily over time, to give yourself the illusion of progress without actually getting stronger, because those stats basically aren't doing anything. Just like inflating your primary, notice how there isn't a piece that gives attack percent increase, like there is a defense percent increase, and there is a HP percent increase item. There isn't like a weapon, for example, that gives attack percent increase. Perhaps they'll add it in the future. It would be nice if there was a light element weapon that added attack percent increase, but I doubt that they will add such a thing. But if they did, you can guarantee it would cost a fortune. That's that's basically what would happen. But with the enhancement system going up to 99 in our version of the game, they didn't even playtest this. Defense does not have an exponential scalability like attack does, with all of its different multipliers and skills and things like that really blow up the attack value. Defense levels vary like linearly, and that when the levels like that they were play tested at, maxing out at 40, and 40 being almost unattainable anyway, that seemed fair to the Korean developers, the original designers of the game. When the North American, when the global team got a hold of this and decided to change the enhancement system and to make the level 99, they tested literally zero things. These stats don't work at scale, because one is designed to multiply and one is not designed to multiply. So after you get a certain amount of attack value, because the nature of how much you can multiply that attack value, defense basically becomes meaningless after a certain point of attack. And while it's not mitigating nothing, it's just the amount of damage that's being mitigated as a percent. If you get if all your stuff is 40, it's here. If it's all of it's 50, the defense's relative damage reduction ability is lower. At 60, it's lower again. At 70, it's lower again. At 80, it's lower, and it's always lower. And then the defense is basically taken over by another stat called damage reduction percent, which basically in our version of the game should be considered the only defensive stat. Even defense is kind of a bloated stat that's not really doing anything at the scale of the attack that we have. It's kind of nice for really strong players to be able to gatekeep people with much lower attack than their particular defensive stat. For example, if there's like a big whale who has like 99 armors, very few of those, but they exist. Then somebody with like 100,000 attack, which used to be considered a huge amount of attack, they, if they multiply them that by like a 300% mod, like it's still not really going to hurt that person that much. When they've got 500,000 defense or some crazy number or whatever it is at maxed out 99 gear. So you have like these ridiculous disproportionate value of stats. The combat power that they give is disproportionate. Some of the stats don't do anything, and a lot of the products that they sell make the number go up to make you feel like you're progressing, but are actually making you weaker, like in the case of mounts. And then the icing on the cake is when you play PvP with other players, you match based off of this number. And it's just crazy. Anyway, that's going to be today's rant. Maybe I'll do another rant and I'll go deep diving in on the enhancement system later, but I just felt like bitching today.